Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are live. I'm going to click over here. Instagram makes me do a little extra step here. So let me just get that up and going. And that is live as well. So first off, I just want to call out that I was very nicely sitting here waiting for Celeste to join, wondering if something had come up, and shot her an email even to ask if she was still good for today's live. And she responded, yes, looking forward to it. And I just kept smiling, thinking, well, it's 12 o'clock and she's not here, and realized I had never sent Celeste the link to join the Go Live. So generally speaking, if it's running late, it's usually there's like some type of technical issue, or sometimes the guest has trouble getting on. But this was 100% me not sending you the link, and you were very patient waiting and hopped on literally within seconds of me sending the link over to you. So I apologize, but I did want to note to everybody that that's why we're late. Yeah, thank you for being patient and for your grace with it. I wonder if everything's okay. So welcome in, everybody. Thank you for those of you who are joining us live. Thank you to those of you who are joining us recorded after the fact. We appreciate you taking the time, and we're always confident that something that one of us says is going to either entertain or educate you in some way. And so it always excites me to think about people tuning in from wherever they're tuning in and what they might take away from the conversation. So with that said, Celeste, why don't you introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about you, and then we'll chat.
Okay. Hi, I'm Celeste Sowder. I am the founder of the Soul Sister Project. You see the neon back there. I really help women tell their stories. I alleviate overwhelm and let them get out there and really build them up and tell their stories. And then I'm a farmer's wife. I'm a mom of two girls. I have experience in homeschooling. There's all kinds of stuff that we could go like down that rabbit hole. But I also am a huge mental health advocate because of some issues that I had last year. And so anyways, I'm multifaceted like all of us, right? And so that's a little bit about me. Just kind of skimming the surface, but there you have it. My name is Celeste Sowder.
Excellent. Yeah, skimming the surface for sure, because I've had conversations with you and I know a lot of the detail and depth behind those things. But of course, when you're giving people synopsis, you can't tell the story behind each of those things. It is Mental Health Awareness Month, so obviously, that's one thing that you noted, and that's something that's really important to me as well. I think that it's important for people who are struggling to be able to feel comfortable saying, I need help. It's important for people who are surrounding people that are struggling to say, hey, how can I help? Or to, encourage people to get the help that they need. And just for there to be a decrease still in the stigma that surrounds it, so that people feel comfortable saying they're in therapy, they take medication, they're in a support group, whatever those different things are, because we are all better together. And our mental, physical, and spiritual well-being are so closely entwined in terms of how we're going to develop as individuals, personally, professionally, etc. And across all of those areas that you touched upon, right? Whether you're a spouse, a friend, a mother, a sibling, a child, employee, employer, it's important for us to take those. So let's talk a little bit about the mental health advocacy piece, because I think that does tie in with all of those other things that you mentioned in terms of wanting people to be their best selves, and being your best self means addressing your whole being.
Yes.
What are some things that you think when you say mental health advocate, what does that look like for you in terms of your preferred personal and or professional identity?
Okay. So it's honestly, it's a very personal topic that bleeds into my professional identity. So I grew up in in the 90s with a father that was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I think honestly, looking back now at some of the things that he dealt with, it would have been more kind of in the spectrum type of thing, but we didn't have that. It was 1994 before they even had Asperger's. Like it was, So I was living in West Texas, 1990. My dad not only had mental health issues, he was also homosexual. And so like we had a lot of stigmas going against us. And my dad really, really fought hard for his identity and answers, right, of why he is the way he was, or like just mental health. And there was a lot of things that because we were in such a time in our, like, in the history of mental health, there was a lot of unanswereds. And so I went through life. I'm just going to get real deep, Deb, like, you know me. So
Go
I'm just
for
going
it.
to go deep.
Yeah, yeah.
So I went through life, really judging him, honestly, and white knuckling my sanity. I I judged him so harshly for a lot of his humanness, and so in that judgment, I placed a higher standard on myself, and so I didn't talk about mental health. I didn't talk about my feelings, so much so that I would have like a physical, emotional reaction when I would get angry. So I'd cry, or if I remember there was one time I'm having to go through all these things like now, and I'll tell you, like, last year I had a mental breakdown, and a lot of it had to do with that white knuckling of my sanity and the judgments I'd passed and not asking for help when I needed it and not knowing I needed help when I needed it. And so there was one time when I was 14 that I had this really emotional reaction to a breakup. And I laid in my floor of my bathroom in like a catatonic state for like 14, 16 hours and not knowing that that wasn't normal. Right.
Yeah.
And I picked myself up. I didn't tell anybody about it until now. Like, I'd never shared that with anyone. Um, and I went about my business like I didn't have it, like it didn't happen. And last year I had a hormonal imbalance that didn't allow me to keep stuffing the emotions. And in that mental breakdown, it actually happened to be, I thought I was just going through a depression, but it was a psychosis now that I know more. And
Mm.
because it was a hormonal imbalance that wasn't going away, I couldn't get out of the psychosis. Like, I literally could not pick myself back up and put that wall up, or that mask, or whatever you want to call it, up. And so I had to get real and I had to ask for help. But it took months for me to ask for help. And this is for me, like, this is going like years into, I'm being vulnerable online and I'm talking and I'm authentic and I'm known for my authenticity, and I'm literally having a mental breakdown in the background. So, you get like that much of somebody's life online, and then there's this whole world going on that we don't understand. And so when I talk about it, people still don't, there's some that don't really understand what was happening. And then there's some that can see, because I'm different. Because when you white knuckle something from fear of losing control, losing your mental or whatever, once that fear happens, once you are on the other side of the fear actually happening, it's like, you don't have the fear anymore. So like the fear of being judged, or the fear of talking about my mental health, or the fear of losing my mind is no longer there because it's happened.
Yeah.
And so I really just work at really being wholehearted with people. I just want to bring a wholeheartedness to this world. And whether I'm for you, or I mean, or if if you're in my space, like, I'm
Right.
wholeheartedly for you. And so that's what my heart, even for the Soul Sister Project, let's bleed over into the professional. That's my heart for it, is that I know that there are women that have stories to tell, that they have come through adversity and they want advocacy for it now, but they don't know where to start, or they're scared to speak up about it. And that's the space where I want to be. Let me help you apply tools and strategies, because I'm all about AI too, but apply the tools and strategies to alleviate the overwhelm that you feel when you're like, I don't know where to start and I don't know what to start talking about. I don't know who I'm talking to alleviate that, but then also for that wholehearted um, community feeling that, you have people behind you rooting for you and that are um, cheering you on. Like, Deb, for real, your book's going to be on my doorstep today, and I'm
Mhm.
super excited.
Thank you.
And it just, that's being the change you want in the world, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I'm getting emotional. I'm trying to, and a part of me is like, yeah, if I cry, I'm just going to let it out. Because I'm glad that I feel that way. I think, first off, thank you for sharing that. For me, I think one of the best things that we can do, one of the most powerful things we can do, is share those really hard, dark. I call them dark because when we're in those places, they're dark. They are
yeah.
periods of light now because we can use them in order to help other people. But when you're in those dark places, I've been in those dark places. It's, I mean, horrendous, right? Like the words that you have to use to describe it can seem to people who haven't experienced it like hyperboles. Like, how can you call it grotesque? How can you call it that, right? But that's what it feels like, the horror that you feel. And even though to some degree, depending on how deep you go into it, you can sometimes know like this is not reality. Like I'm feeling this, so I shouldn't say not reality, but this is a dark feeling. There is another side. I can get on the other side of this. But when you're in it and it's so dark, it's suffocating.
Yeah,
right.
It truly is.
And so there's, first off, if you can get past the I'm concerned about the stigma, which a lot of people face, right? Concerned about the impression that people are going to have. But also when you're in those dark places, it's like you're not even necessarily consciously thinking I don't deserve help or I don't want to get help, but you just don't feel like doing anything. You just want the feeling to go away. And I think now looking back, right? So for me, mental health advocacy, which is very much parallel with what you're saying, looking back and seeing the like, okay, here was where this would have helped. I'm not mad at myself or anybody around me who didn't necessarily do the right thing, because I think sometimes people weren't necessarily trying to be helpful, but sometimes people were and just didn't know what was the correct thing to do. But now I know looking backwards, I could only know looking backwards. And so when we share those stories with people, we empower people to first off feel more capable of stepping out and saying like, I've experienced that. I'm here. I am. I know what that's like. And we let people know that there are solutions and that there are things, because, you know, I started very early as well. In elementary school was one of my earliest memories of standing on the playground. I talk about this and just feeling darkness and like thinking like the sun's shining, people are running around, they're laughing. I was going through some traumatic childhood experiences that were contributing. So it was both environmental and the genetic and chemical stuff that was going on inside of me. But, you know, I called it the really bad feeling. That's what we referred to it as. I'm having one of those really bad feelings. I kind of felt like this is just a thing I'm going to have to deal with. And of course, as I got older and it continued to take place and it got worse sometimes, it really became like, this is just like, I'm going to have to be like this the rest of my life. And while, yes, depression and anxiety and panic are very much still a part of my life, I do need to be mindful of triggers. I do need to take care of myself. Now I know that there are solutions. And that's why it's so critical for us to step out and say those things, because the people who are in those dark places, like we were in, feeling like, okay, I just got to suck it up and like get up and move on. Like, no, don't. And actually, it's really good if you don't, because if you start fixing it right now or start trying to fix it right now, not fix you, fix the feeling, fix the problem, right? You're not broken. That's experience. You can become such a more peaceful person. It doesn't mean your problems are going to go away. It doesn't mean, which can be sometimes a misunderstanding, it doesn't mean I don't have periods of sadness, right? Things upset me, things make me happy, things that make me frustrated, but being able to be clearer in processing it, thinking about it. I can't imagine going back to a period of not knowing, just now that I know. And so, gosh, if every time we say something, if just one person hears it and is like, oh, yeah, I can talk about this, I can get help, man, that to me, that's gold. That's better than anything. That's better than any award. That's better than any paycheck. Like that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So as you were talking, I was brought back to in the middle of this psychosis that I was months of it. And, you know, I would have periods where I was experiencing life and I wasn't overwhelmed. But most of the time, if I was left to my own thoughts, like I couldn't get out of them, you know, and there were times where I would just go on long walks and I would put Audible in an audiobook in my ears and just get in somebody else's story, because that was the only reprieve that I had. It would quiet the noise in my brain. And I honestly thought I was in a spiritual warfare, and it was literally chemical imbalance, right? And undiagnosed ADHD. I'm 41 years old and just got diagnosed with ADHD. I'm one of those TikTokers, you know, kind of thing. And so anyways, but one of the books, I wanted to really like hone in on this book, Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, was a beacon of light for me. Like so much so, I'm going to So much so, because it put a name to what I felt for so long, and that was shame. And it wasn't even that it was brought on by others, and it was because, you know, you walk through childhood trauma, and then you walk through trying to numb the pain, and with, you know, with all the things, you know, we're talking sex, drugs, alcohol, you know, all the things. Um, you can't help but pick up shame. But see, I used shame even in the self-development part, where I would find something I felt shameful about, and I would pile the shame back on me to fix it. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
Mm,
So,
redirect it. Yeah. Because
yeah,
that you
I
could
would
actually try to fix where you couldn't fix the other stuff. Sure.
yeah, so it was a behavioral modification for me, and it was a shame. And so it got to the point where everything was a shame trigger. Everything in life, you know, any kind of correction. Um, if I felt joy, it would trigger shame and vulnerability. Like, it was this really weird, not weird, but
Yeah.
very heavy. A lot of people feel it. There's books written about it, obviously. And her book was the beacon of light that I needed to start asking for help, because I was worth it. And I wasn't unworthy, because like, shame was not a part of me. It's not a part of me. And I'm just months walking into this, and like, you were talking about triggers, and I'm like, anytime that shame trigger gets triggered, I'm like, I have to address it. I can't not anymore, because I can't stuff it anymore. Again, when you lose control of that white knuckling feeling, you don't have the fear anymore, right? To like, be your own advocate. And so, you know, I've addressed things with my own mother, and I've addressed things with my husband, and I've addressed things with my kids, and I address when I see shame on them. And it is only by, on the other side of it, getting through it, right? It's that hindsight is 2020, and not numbing it, because I couldn't. I had just had gastric sleeve surgery. I couldn't drink, because I didn't want the addiction transfer. I quit smoking years ago. Couldn't smoke. You know, I live in the middle of nowhere in Texas. Like, we didn't have those other things available. Like, I couldn't but address it like that. I couldn't do anything but address it. And in that, you know, I found a beacon of light, and it was by quieting the noise in my head with the audiobook, of all things. So, and a lot of
Yeah.
other things, but that was a big one.
Well, feeling that there's somebody else that understands it, right? Like you said, when it puts a name to it, puts a feeling to it that you can relate to. Because I think, and there's like kind of 2 points I want to make with that, but I think it was resonating with me as you were sharing it. One is the fact that, like you said, it was that, but it was other things, that the mental health. And this is so important, for I'm going to like pause to say to people, if they're listening and they can relate to this really important point, it's a journey. It's not like you get diagnosed, there's a treatment, and then it's better. Like, there can be, if medication is the route for you, it's not for everybody, but if it's the route for you, there can be trying different medications, there can be trying different therapists, there could be figuring out if there's food triggers, is there a better schedule that you need, it's like it's a process. And so, like, because there were periods where like it would start to get better, and then I would have another episode, and so then I would think like, oh my gosh, there's not a solution, because I was feeling better, and now I'm not. And now, so like, there's a lot of panic that goes into that. And so I think like the reassurance that, like, as awful as it is when you have those episodes after you've started getting treatment, like, that doesn't mean like, great, there's no solution for me, or there's no way to be fixed. It's like, there's very much, you have to work with it and find the people that you're going to surround yourself with, who are going to help you to keep that in check too. And that's not easy for everybody. And the other thing that you said, the identification piece. So for me, and it was later in life, because I had been having, you know, like you shared, from childhood, you know, I grew up in a traumatic household. There was violence, there was, you know, mental abuse. It was like a lot of just different things. And so also dealt with that shame, because like there is a certain degree of shame that's, I don't like the word shame, but there is a certain degree of guilt that's okay, right? If you do something wrong, we are supposed to feel a little bit of bad about it, so that we go, okay, I need to acknowledge this, make my apologies. Okay, but like trying to balance what is and isn't an appropriate response to something, because you also don't want to not take responsibility, but so many pieces to it. And so on this journey of just trying to figure everything out and feeling guilt about the depression because when I would hit it and what impact did it have on other people, and
Mhm.
um, was having this really bad panic, anxiety, depression, all of it combined. I know there's a lot of overlapping symptoms, so where one begins and the other ends. But again, it
Yeah.
was all this, and went to the doctor, and um, he was trying to explain to me kind of like the process forward, because I was just feeling so dark that it was like I'm exhausted. I can't do this anymore. I don't know, like, what are we going to do to fix this? And he was trying to tell me, like, we're going to get a little better and then a little bit more better and a little bit more better. And he said, the reason this particular episode is going on so long at such a sustained rate, because normally somebody would kind of, like he said, if you spiral into a panic attack, you're going to kind of hit rock bottom and have to go to the emergency room or something. He's
Mhm.
like, you've actually built up like panic endurance because of
Mm.
all these years of experiencing it. You're having a sustained panic attack. And that's why the intensity is so severe, because you're like in a state of terror, which is that fight or flight. And it's not doing what it would normally do, which is peak and then you crash or whatever. It was like staying in this heightened state. So I was like just constantly on edge. And so I had kind of gone home and did a little bit of reading, early-ish ages of the internet. And so it was some like blog site or something, like chat room. And this person had written this article about their experience with panic attacks. So that was what I was looking up, because I was like, okay, let me dig a little bit more into this panic attack thing, and use the phrase grotesque horror to
Mm.
describe it. And it was the first time ever, I was in my 20s, that I was like, yes, like that's the phrase. Like people would use these other phrases that were descriptive in nature and like did seem like they were heading in the right direction, but never before had I felt so affirmed than to read somebody saying grotesque horror. Because for me, the feeling was like walking into a room and seeing something very tragic and terrible has happened. Like it was
Yeah.
devastating. So here is this term, grotesque horror, and yet for me, that term was this term of hope, because I'm like,
Yeah.
somebody gets
Yeah.
it. This isn't just me.
I'm
This
not by
somebody knows.
myself. Yeah.
Right. And so and I am emotional sharing that as well, because I remember thinking in that moment that no matter what, I am always going to remember that there are other people out there,
Mhm. I was
and
yeah.
yeah, like you said with her book, I think that there's such a sense of isolation. I don't care, you could be in a room surrounded by people who are telling you they love you, you just feel alone. I mean, the
Mhm.
darkness just sits so deep inside of you. So to hear those words resonate and say, like, somebody else who wasn't experiencing tragedy, because when you have that experience with tragedy, it's like, okay, well, you've just experienced tragedy, but this is
Yeah.
years later, right?
Yeah.
And then you start to identify the things that trigger it. And for me, there, TV shows like you were talking about, the Audible. I would put on comedy TV shows in the background. I'd have to be very careful that there weren't any of these trigger words or trigger music or trigger situations in the shows, because that would make it worse. So I'd have to have on like, very silly comedy shows in the background and just kind of have that playing so that I could distract myself. And that was a technique. And to this day, still, I'll try to make myself laugh when I feel it coming, because I know that like laughter,
Mhm.
both from an emotional perspective and physically, it releases endorphins. So yeah, I think that's where mental health advocacy is us being that voice, that word, that identity for somebody else who feels like nobody knows it. Right. They
Yeah.
might look at us and see like, oh, here are two people who are very visible on social media and they're successful and they've got people responding to their post positively. So they've got some degree of, at least you would think, self-confidence, because they're having people speak into them. And so when we say, hey, there are moments when I'm like right on the edge and
Not
very fragile and really
yeah.
concerned, I don't want to break, that helps other people to know that they're able to live that dichotomy as well, and that having this struggle does not mean you're not also able to be a bright light.
Yeah. Amen. I'm gonna get behind that for real, because that I think that's what keeps people from speaking, is that they're still feeling in a broken place. And I'm gonna tell you, I think I'm more broken now sometimes than I ever was before, because I acknowledge it. I went to a retreat this last weekend, and I'm learning to trust myself, right? And I'm learning to trust my higher power, but I don't trust people right now. And that is a really hard place to be, is in a room full of people and not trusting anyone. And it's just like you said, they could be speaking life and love over me. And they were giving me a place, but I still felt like broken, right? And untrustworthy of their intentions towards me. And it's just a lot of things that have bubbled to the surface because I've allowed myself to start looking at the things. And in this brokenness, right? And I feel that there's so much light shining through my brokenness. And if anything, don't let it go to waste, right? Just don't let it go to waste. And so that's what keeps me going, right? It keeps me getting up and going live, and it keeps me showing up in rooms of people that I know that I'm safe, but I don't feel safe at the time. It it builds my resilience. And what I found in resilience, you were talking about laughter. This is the second time I heard that in the last few days, is that laughter, brings joy, and it ushers in a different perspective. It ushers in endorphins. So you have this chemical change, and not just that, but it's like it lightens the load, right? And well, I've learned in this season of my life, I'm 41 and I never really understood resilience. Like I would quit everything I started because it was hard and would feel hard, right? I would get some resistance and I'm like, done. And I'm learning resilience actually ushers in joy too. Because when you push past the fears, when you push past those fears, because fears will keep you stuck. They'll keep you in a place of stuck for years, right? When you push past those fears and you just go head first into what's on your heart, your dreams, your aspirations, and then on top of it, your advocacy, because that's where it is where your adversity is. That's where you advocate for. And when you push past that, that's where resilience is found. But that resilience, when you keep doing it, it brings so much joy, not even just into your life, but you get to be a beacon of that, right? Like you get to be that hope for someone else. And it's just an amazing feeling. And then there are still times that I'm not okay. And that's okay too. And that's okay too, as long as it doesn't go to waste.
Yeah. I mean, light shines quite beautifully through broken things, right? You think of broken glass. I mean, some beautiful things can shine through that and opens up avenues that you wouldn't have otherwise maybe have seen. Maybe you would have. I don't necessarily want to say that I'm grateful for the depression. What I'm grateful for is the opportunities that I've been given in my life to utilize that to provide others with hope and to see beautiful things. And I do think that a sensitivity that came with part of what allowed me to be susceptible to some of the emotional highs and lows is also some of what allowed me to see things in a very specific way. Like you mentioned my book, and in putting this one together, because I had I've been writing since I was in elementary school, and so I really wanted to kind of pull out like from various different ages and things. And so I've been going through old journals and reading old diaries, some of which I really hadn't read since I was little. And you read some of these things that I wrote, and you mentioned I'm still not okay sometimes. I mean, there were some things that I read or some pictures that I looked at that brought up emotions, not that I thought that were forgotten or didn't exist anymore, but that I didn't realize were maybe still as raw. Raw's the best word, maybe isn't the, because I think we're who we are. We're our past, our present, and our future. I mean, we're one person and we're the whole being. And so I'm not going to say that necessarily like I'm not that little girl anymore. I am. I'm very much still that little girl. I have awareness now that little girl didn't know. But in some regards, she had some awareness that I don't have now in the way that she looked at things. That's why I read some of my diary entries and I'm like, go little Deb. Like that was a cool, so I think like we do need to kind of put together and recognize that we have all these highs and lows of all the different areas of our life. And there are some things that I think will always be hard for me to think about and not feel sadness. And I don't think that means it's not because I haven't moved on or let go or forgiven, but because they were sad things. And, by the grace of God, both my parents were alcoholics and there was violence. The main perpetrator of the violence was my father, who is not an alcoholic anymore. He's in recovery and I have a relationship with him. And some of my friends who were with me in childhood sometimes are not questioning in a negative way, but they're like, it's so strange though, to just see that you were able to overcome. And again, there were beautiful things that happened in childhood as well. So it wasn't like all negative,
Right.
but it's this amazing kind of puzzle of all of these different pieces that bring us to where we are. And when we share all those, like when you share your brokenness, when you're willing to say that you're not okay, because saying you're not okay is actually saying you are okay. Like, I am this person who gets angry and sad and happy and resilient and all of the emotions,
All the things. Yeah.
making up this beautiful, incredible human being. And when you see them in yourself, you then see them in everybody else, and you recognize that we're all more alike than we're not.
Yeah.
And that we have so much to offer one another. One of my favorite things is to think about the fact that, like, I think sometimes we're like, okay, where's the silver lining in this cloud? And sometimes we don't really necessarily ever see it, because sometimes the silver lining is the positive impact that we had on somebody else. And while that's hard, when you're like, wait a minute, I went through all of that to help somebody else. Sometimes, sometimes that is what happens. And sometimes, but like, that is a beautiful thing. And it's the same way that other people are going to help us too. So difficult to kind of swallow all that and process that on an intellectual and emotional level. And that's why these conversations become so valuable. I mean, this is legitimately a conversation we would have had offline, and it's just happening to happen live with people listening. So I hope people are nodding and feeling that there it is. It's just all laid out flat. Like, I'm not going to try to be the victim. I'm not going to try to be the hero. I'm everything. I'm everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Like, I just love getting with you anyways, Deb. I think this is just our second conversation, but I'm like, we're like soul sisters for real. Just a kindred spirit. And I love positive thought leaders, right? That we all see the need for change, and we want to be that change. And you were definitely one of them. And so I appreciate you. And I appreciate this budding relationship. And I look forward to seeing what happens next and in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really appreciate being here.
Thank you. I'm sorry. And I started to cut you off because I was nodding in agreement. Sometimes my voice, I'm not going to start blaming that on past trauma, but I do notice sometimes I start talking and I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't want to talk. Like, my mouth decides it's going. And I'm like, hold on, pulling back the reins. You're saying you too. Yeah. So I guess it's cool though, because I feel like if you call it out, it's a little less, because I sometimes will cut people off and then I'm thinking like, I don't want them to think I thought what they were saying wasn't important. It's literally like in my head sometimes I'm like, stop, but it doesn't stop. And I'm like, well, all right, well, it's out there
the same way.
What am I gonna do? But to your note, and I think it's really cool because I was a teacher. In my early career was a teacher, and I shouldn't say I was a teacher. I'm a teacher still, just in a different way. But I was an educator in a high school. I love the concept of education just in general because we all have knowledge we can impart to each other. And now, in the business world, and I think, helping businesses be successful, right? It's at the core, you've got to help people be successful before you can help a business be successful. So people have to be successful as individuals. They have to be able to work as a team. They have to be able to figure out how to hear various perspectives and recognize that there's, there could be anybody within an organization that could have the tool or the knowledge that is needed to be successful. So helping that all happen. But at the core, as a society, right, as a world, right? So if we think of the world as one big gigantic company, and we've all got this part, and so every part needs to be functioning at its best in order for the other parts to function at their best. And so when we help an individual, we're ultimately helping the world, and we're helping then each individual team, whether it's the family unit, whether it's a geographic region, right? All of those different pieces to function. So I think the power of one is really important. And then when you put those voices together, the power of my voice, the power of your voice, the power of whoever voices are listening to this, who are then going to go out and share with other people. It's magnificent. It's magnificent. Every voice has just so much incredible power and beauty to it.
Yes.
So I appreciate us, having this celebration, which is what this conversation was, a celebration of the power of voice.
Mm-hmm.
And of being all those different things. So yes, I agree. I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. I kept trying to not look at the flamingo behind you, but I got to, now that we're like wrapping up the conversation, I'm like, it's, my eyes kept going to the flamingo. I wanted to like acknowledge him and be like, hey, or her, you know, like, come on into the conversation. Oh, it's got a name. That's even better. Now my day is complete. The flamingo has a name, Flo the flamingo.
Yes,
Fantastic.
that's Flo. My grandmother was a huge part of my life, you know, and from early childhood, she allowed me to be me. And one of the first memories I have is her taking me shopping for an outfit that I got to pick out, and it was a pink flamingo outfit. And so when the Soul Sister project was birthed in 2020, like I just couldn't not use a flamingo because it was all about being authentic. And so, yep, that's Flo.
Yeah, and there's so much about flamingos. I won't get off onto a tangent because I
Yeah.
love nature. So there's so much about flamingos that makes flamingos a perfect representative of that also.
Yes.
And I want to say it was one of the mastermind days actually, and I was like out walking behind the golf course and like saw a flamingo flying overhead, and I was thinking like, I don't think in my life I'd ever seen one just like out in the wild. Like I'd seen them in zoos and things, but like flying, and it was such a cool thing to see this like flamingo flying overhead.
Wow.
So they're just, yeah, they're a really beautiful animal, and they look awkward, right? Like if you looked at it, you think that is not going to be graceful, and then they walk so gracefully. And I just think like that's all of us, right? We are all awkward. We refer to sometimes people as being awkward, but we're all awkward. We're all trying to figure out what to say and not to say, and how to walk and how to be, and you know, trying to be authentic when you're not even really sure what your authentic self is sometimes, because there's so much noise. So yeah, let us all be flamingo-esque and be awkward and amazing at the same time.
Yes.
So how do people get in touch with you, Celeste? They want to because they're going to want to.
Yeah, so I'm really active on Facebook. I know that's like weird, but I am.
I love it.
I'm very active on Facebook. I do have an Instagram, and I am on TikTok. But I'm most active on Facebook. It's just that's my platform. It's my jam. And then the Soul Sister Project is just kind of getting up and going on socials. So I would really look for me for right now. And then I'll be adding more to the Soul Sister Project. And I'm also, can I just do a little blurb real quick? I'm looking for women entrepreneurs that have a story, that want to tell the story, and they might be already telling their story like you, Deb, but I need women over 35 that have an entrepreneurial spirit that want or are willing to get online and share their stories for advocacy, to just get with me for educational purposes. I am working on really honing in on my the Soul Sister Project and what that foundation would be, and for educational purposes, I just need to talk to people to see what they need, so that I have a wholehearted, very empathetic and foundational start to the Soul Sister Project. So
you're looking for, you'd like to connect with people that could help you provide feedback and information that'll help create the foundation. That's fantastic. And I always let people know too, because so you said you're on Facebook and Instagram. Is it at your name, or is there different? Okay, I wasn't sure. Or sometimes people have other. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I always tell people too, like, well, sometimes I forget, but I intend to always tell people, if you know me or connected to me and you'd like an introduction, because you just don't like to kind of reach out to somebody you don't know yet, please feel free. I do have people sometimes afterwards who'll say, hey, can you do an introduction? And I would absolutely do that. Even if you're not connected to me. Yeah. Okay.
For you, so, like if anybody comes from my camp, I would love to introduce them to Deb. You're amazing, Deb. You are.
Thank you.
Anyways.
Thank you. This is beautiful. I mean, I could have talked all day just going on about the whole, and I hadn't even, you know, I knew it's Mental Health Awareness Month. I've been thinking a lot about it because I've been trying to think of something I'd like to do to kind of honor it, but I haven't figured out exactly what I want to do just yet. And I'm glad that we ended up going on to that conversation. I think that that's really critical. And I know that there's a lot more now than there was in the past. But the more that we have, the better, right? The more that we can just keep sharing our stories and saying, hey, I struggled. I'm still struggling. I love you. You're going to get through this. You're going to be okay. Not the okay that always means that you feel great all the time, but the okay that means that you're going to continue to live your purpose in this world. So what is a final thought that you have for everybody?
You matter. You matter. Your life matters. Your story matters. You matter. And I think that that's your motto too, but that it just, you matter. Absolutely. Like deep down.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It is an important one to me too. And you know what, Celeste, that you can never say that enough, because you can say it, people can hear it and believe it one day and not believe it the next. So, um, my daughter, it's on a side story. We were closing out the conversation, but I was texting somebody the other day, and because I actually have merch that says "You Matter" on it. And it's like a smiley face, because I think it's a simple, like, you can keep telling yourself it thing, right?
Mhm.
I like things that you can continue to repeat to yourself when you're having a rough time. But I responded back to somebody, "You matter," and she said something about it being corny, but she wasn't saying it in a critical way. Like, when I looked at her, she had this look of like of admiration and respect and love for me when she said it. Like you're, and when we talked about it, it was that you're so willing to just, like, you're not worried about how it's going to be perceived. You just say
Yeah.
it. And like, that's the same way that I feel about you. I feel like we're like, it's okay if something I says makes somebody even chuckle at me in a way,
Yeah.
because like ultimately, like, that's all right as long as the positive message was heard. And so I appreciate you for, and I know this is really only the second long conversation that we've had, as you noted, but we comment on each other's things, like
Yeah.
we're
Oh,
interacting out there,
absolutely.
and I
Like
appreciate that.
we're
Yeah,
yeah, we're
yeah,
Facebook
it's
friends
like,
and we like deeper than that even. So yes, I absolutely.
right. Yeah, yeah. I just think that, like, the more that we just give each other that ability to be that, like, the world needs it. The world
Mhm.
chuckles at it, but I feel like even when people are chuckling at it, they're getting that warm, gushy feeling, and that's what I'm going for. So I'll keep
Yeah.
eliciting that, even if it's people chuckling, like, "Oh, she said that comment again." Like, so I'm glad, and I feel like you and I are going to continue to change people's lives, change the dynamics, support one another's endeavors. I will definitely direct people to you, as you know, for your
Thank you.
research, and yeah, any other way, obviously, that I can support. Please do let me know. And for everybody listening, we love you. We're here. Reach out to Celeste or me
Yes.
on the mental health front. I'm not a mental health professional.
Me neither.
Celeste is not a mental health professional, but if you would like just support and even making the decision to go get help,
Mhm.
if you just want to, I'm not sure how you would kind of anonymously communicate with me on social media. So I can just only tell you that it would be in confidence. But if you are struggling, there are people that will love into you. And so please feel free to reach out to Celeste or myself or somebody else in your circle that can
Yes.
help you, because you do really matter, like Celeste said. So I love that was your words for everybody. And thank you for taking time today and for being patient with my link that arrived
Thank you.
after the actual start of the go live. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.